My convict ancestor was Irish. For a long time, Irish ships didn't actually come to Van Diemen's Land. The story goes that Governor Sorrell thought the Irish were too troublesome. Van Diemen's Land won't take any more Irish convicts until England sends us more soldiers. This didn't happen. Soldiers are expensive. Food, accommodation, the dry cleaning bills for those redcoats are off the charts. So for about 20 years, between 1820 and 1840, all the Irish convict ships went to New South Wales. It was only when transportation to New South Wales ended in 1840 that Van Diemen's Land had to suck it up and take the Irish again, as troublesome as they were. Or were they? Were the Irish the troublesome, absconding, poor workers they were thought to be? Surely the government wouldn't have made such a bold policy decision that so drastically affected the lives of thousands without a little bit of evidence to back it up. Surely. But the Irish, they're not like us. Many Irish didn't actually speak English, which would have made things pretty tricky for them. They can't even read and write. Irish literacy levels were lower than English and Scottish convicts. They're actually really not very useful. The Irish were also relatively unskilled, thanks to Ireland not industrialising at the same rate as England, and also due to some widespread land clearance practices in the 19th century that turned agricultural land into grazing land and put people out of work. And they're always misbehaving. Our data actually shows that punishment and misbehaving weren't always related. Unskilled convicts were more likely to be punished than convicts whose skills were useful to the colony. Under the assignment system, convicts were billeted as private labour to masters. Masters sent misbehaving convicts to the magistrate for punishment. If you had a convict who wasn't particularly useful, mate, this is a farm. What am I going to do with a weaver? Then maybe they had an incentive to send them for punishment. Took a less useful convict off your hands for a couple of days, and if you're lucky, you might get sent someone new. You're a ploughman, you say. On the other hand, a more useful convict would be more missed from work in the time it took them to send them for punishment. So maybe you'd let some misdemeanours slide. So that's your first warning. Warning. If the Irish were more unskilled, it made them more at risk of being punished. The assignment system ended in 1840, right around the time that the Irish convict ships started returning to Van Diemen's Land after that 20-year break. Convicts were then under the probation system, where every convict worked a probationary period on a government project before they could work as private labour. The Irish had statistically smaller sentences compared to English or Scottish convicts, generally breaking the law for survival rather than for gain, and so spent comparatively less time in probation gangs. Hold on. Where was I? One of the great pastimes of convicts was absconding, running away. The Irish were known bolters, and this is obviously reflected in the data. What? Irish were half as likely to abscond as the English, but the Irish get branded as bolters? What is up with that? If you spend less time in road gangs or chain gangs where punishment rates are higher, then you're less likely to abscond. So it's not that the Irish were necessarily better behaved, it's more complicated than that. But still, the prejudice is not supported by the data. After sentence, it's a different story. Irish convicts had higher recidivism rates. Aha! This doesn't mean they were more criminal though. It just meant they had a harder time integrating back into the community after sentence. They're more likely to be convicted of crimes associated with vagrancy or disorderly conduct, symptoms of unemployment, rather than property offences. Oh, vagrancy, like you. I'm not a vagrant. I'm a PhD student. Yeah, well, how are you going to meet someone if you never leave the house? I leave the house? That is an assumption based on a stereotype. These are yoga pants. Not what they look like. I think you look great. Transportation wasn't just the movement of bodies across an empire. It was also the transportation of ideas and values. England's paternalistic treatment of Ireland, economically and politically at that time, can be seen reflected in the colonial administration's attitudes toward Irish convicts. If we're talking prejudiced attitudes affecting colonial policy, we are only just getting started. Most convict men didn't marry. I'd like someone tall,